I'd like to introduce you to our cover lot, lot 282, which is an extraordinary portrait of Freda Feldman in a Basuto hat by Irma Stern. It was painted in 1943, and I think it's very much the main highlight of our upcoming sale in Johannesburg. Many of you would be familiar, I imagine, with the very expressionist, I suppose wilder depictions of some of her sitters. By contrast, this work is much more tightly painted, much more deliberately rendered. And there's a huge amount of love and respect, I think, in this picture, and it's very much because of the close relationship that Irma Stern had with Freda Feldman, as well as her husband, Richard Feldman. Richard Feldman came to Johannesburg in 1910 from Lithuania. He was 13, I think, at the time. He settled with his family and his brother Louis. He was, by all accounts, an intellectual, a very eligible bachelor, a romantic man. But most importantly, I suppose for this picture, is in the 1920s he develops a genuine interest in the work of Irma Stern. Richard Feldman, who arranges a show of Irma's work here in Johannesburg in 1926, is blown away, I suppose, by her painting, its very genuine links to the European avant-garde. And he is most likely the first critic to write very positively about Irma's work. Richard Feldman meets Freda Ginsberg in the late 1920s here in Johannesburg. In 1931, apparently, when Richard is in Durban, he realizes that Freda is absolutely the love of his life. And he immediately telegrams Freda to propose. And he also mentioned that she might jump on the train immediately, having got the fare from Richard's brother Louis. And Freda does this, and she travels down to Durban the next day, and they essentially elope. This is when Freda first meets Irma Stern. Freda at the time is only 20 years old, but one that is hugely hungry, I suppose, for cultural exposure here in Johannesburg. In the early 1930s, they build this ultra-modern home here in Lower Houghton. It was full of black tiling and white grouting, very sheer surfaces, and they start a family in the early 30s. They have a son called Jossie, and then a few years later, a daughter called Mona. And Mona, incidentally, is responsible for this wonderful book, Remembering Irma, which is a work that certainly needs to be read by all people interested in Irma's work. I think that the relationship between Freda and Irma was an unlikely one. Freda was 16 years younger than Irma Stern, but they seem to have found things in each other that of course they seem to need. Freda and Irma were both drawn to the exotic. They loved bold color contrasts, and they loved entertaining, they loved food, and they also seem to have shared a love of hats. And I think that's also what makes this particular lot special. It is accompanied by the original Basuto hat that Freda wore when posing for the portrait. The work has been hanging in a home in Sydney for many years, and it's very special that it has returned here to Johannesburg. It is very much a Johannesburg picture, I think.